No.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am part of the Borton team. I teach fourth grade with Rachel. I did teach fourth grade last year with Tia. And so our focus is really desert exploration. And I followed the template you gave, but I also kind of wanted to show what I made. And so here we go. Our learning goal. We really wanted to tie in our understandings of the relationship between weather and climate. And what's great is that Miss Stephanie in outdoor learning also touched a lot on weather and climate, including myself. So the students, majority of them still have that memory of what the differences are. Some of them are still, confusing it, but overall, during this lesson, they were like, oh, Miss Stephanie taught us this, or Miss Stephanie said this. So it was great that they were able to go back on that. We also wanted to define what a desert is and identify factors that contribute to a place being a desert. And overall, our anchoring phenomenon is Tucson is a desert. Okay, which may sound obvious to a lot of us that are older, but to kids, this is still something that they're figuring out. So I also have some student skills goals that we wanted from this lesson. Analyzing and interpreting data, whether that's from graphs or just images or things that they collect, asking questions, constructing explanations, developing and using models, and engaging in argument from evidence. So our day one was really, we're going to be discussing and seeing what a desert is or what it looks like. I am the remote teacher for fourth grade, so all of this is remote. It's not exactly what I would have hoped for or intended for this lesson to be, but being remote and getting a combination of the two other fourth grade classes merged into my classroom fourth quarter, really made things interesting, and a lot of changes happening made things difficult, but we're making the best of it this year. So this is one of the first images I showed. Does this image represent deserts? Why do you think that a desert does it? So kids automatically saw the sand, right? And they were like, oh, that's a desert. It has sand. Or they said, I think that's rain, so it could be a desert. Or they also said, like, maybe that's a dust storm. But overall, after talking about these images, the kids were like, but it also kind of reminds us of monsoon season, especially with the lightning bolt. So they're like, this could be the desert. And one kid even said, it kind of looks like the desert area of like Texas. They're like, we don't see any mountains. So they're really paying attention to those details, which is what we wanted to get them to be thinking about and talking about. This next image, does this image represent deserts, right? And the interesting thing was every student that is in my classroom that's in the GATE program, they're all like, well, yeah, miss, this is a desert. Our GATE teacher told us that. But my students that are not in GATE, or like I have one that he reads at a kindergarten level. He said, miss, that's not a desert. I see penguins, which, obviously they haven't understood, what really makes a desert yet. That's that misconception. And so a lot of kids said, well, yeah, this is a desert, or no, because it's cold. This one was a little bit more of a, half and half again. Okay, I see a river. There's not that many rivers and deserts. But then other students said, miss, there are some rivers in Arizona. And one student said, that looks like the Santa Cruz River, which this is actually an image of the Santa Cruz River. And so, and they even tied it to, well, I see those trees around my neighborhood. I see these types of bushes in our washes. So they really got to talk about what they noticed. And I want to add in too, another thing is when we did talk about this is the Santa Cruz River, one of the kids said, well, I haven't seen the river like this in Tucson. And then that tied it, we brought it back to what we, during our water unit, right? We talked about, well, what happened to Tucson's water source, right? When you pull water out of the groundwater, what happens to our rivers that we naturally had? And so they were able to make those connections based on previous lessons. And that was a really nice conversation. This one, the kid said, Miss, that has to be Tucson. There's saguaros there. It has to be a desert. And a couple of them also said though that they're like, I don't think I've seen those flowers in Tucson, but they did recognize the yellow ones, not the pink ones. But many kids were like, Miss, that looks like where a mountain is, so it has to be a desert. And so this is something that we talked about, desert misconceptions and desert truths, right? Desert misconceptions are deserts are hot. They don't have rainfall, doesn't have rivers, and nothing lives there. And we even connected to their families' experiences. Some of them have lived in Tucson their whole lives. Some of them go visit families in the Midwest or in areas that have a lot of rain. And they talked about, what their, their misconceptions of their families um, for where they live. Like they think they live in Tucson. Oh, there's nothing there basically. It's just like they imagine like the tumbleweed, in the going across the desert. And so it was really great to hear, what they've heard personally from other people that they know. And then the desert truths we talked about obviously are deserts are hot and cold. Deserts have monsoon seasons. There are multiple rivers through deserts, and plants and animals live there. And then the kids went on, oh, I love seeing the rabbits or coyotes and things like that. Um, and so we kind of discussed this of what really makes a desert a dry, or the new vocabulary word, arid place. Only a handful of kids that were in GATE knew the word arid, but everybody else understood the term dry. Has extreme temperatures, can be hot or cold, and little precipitation throughout the year. That precipitation word came back from our water cycle unit, and some kids definitely remembered it and some needed a reminder. And so we looked at this graph, and this is just an average over a year, and we just discussed, what we noticed and wondered. And they noticed, the current month that we are in or were in last month, were like the lowest for precipitation values. But then they recognized, okay, over the summer, that makes sense. It's our monsoon season. They are going to have much more inches of water or rainfall come in. And then we took a look at this, which I thought was interesting because it's a monsoon rainfall in Tucson in the past 10 decades. And so if you see, 1920s all the way to the 2020s, and the kids automatically noticed in the 2020s, there is not as much rainfall. And, why is that? And that connected to, we went back to when we were really focusing on our climate change unit, focusing on renewable versus non-renewable resources, and our understanding how the greenhouse effect and CO2 levels, and they played with simulators, understanding that increase of heat and all of those factors have taken a toll on our temperatures and precipitation. And they're like, Miss, what is this year's monsoon season going to look like? They're like, last year we remember there was nothing. And so, it was really interesting to see their minds working and connecting the dots of, the water unit, climate change, and now this. Okay, here in Tucson, this is what's really happening. And so we went on to where is Tucson, which You might think that's an easy question to ask a fourth grader, but when they don't necessarily have a geography background, it's kind of complicated. Um, so we had to really go back, right? And go into this is the US, this is Arizona, highlighted for them, and really talking about what is close to us and what is far away. And the kids really talked about, okay, we know Mexico is right below us, which is great. They know where that country is. They know Canada is really far away. And they did discuss, okay, but we're really close to the, one kid said, the Gulf of Mexico, which is okay, great background knowledge, and we're closer to the Pacific Ocean than we are, the Atlantic. And then we went on into a more advanced stage of Arizona, looking at, they said we're Tucson, we're really close to Tombstone, we're very close to Mexico. From this image, it looks like we're even closer to a part of the ocean, but we look closer to the ocean than we are the Grand Canyon. And so they're able to really see their surroundings. A lot of them had great questions like, what are those little carrot looking things? What are the little symbols in here? They noticed, we talked about, are there any, mapped rivers going through Tucson? Do we notice a lot of vegetation mapped around Tucson? And, we have the couple spots of green, but most of the actual rivers that are mapped are, through the Phoenix metropolitan area and up north, or through the Colorado River. They notice that we have a lot of mostly brown color around us on the map. And so we went over this question: is Tucson a desert? Which, you hope after you go through all these things and explain what a desert is. But yes, we use chat a lot, so they're like, yes, Tucson is a desert. Day 2, right? So I didn't get as far, and I will go into more of a reflection at the end. But next we start talking about mountain ranges. So review: is Tucson a desert? Yes. And what land features do you notice are in Arizona? So then we got to go deeper into land features, which land features became a topic of what is a land feature and how to really scaffold that question to describe what it is and highlight and annotate. The kids pointed out, they read the different rivers or lakes, and they asked, what are those green things? Because they're not really used to having grass or things like that. And then we went into what are cardinal directions, because I really, in the lesson that we planned, Rachel and I and Stephanie, we know it's important for them to have a sense of direction. And I know Stephanie had touched on some map features and things like that before for outdoor learning, but they still needed this review. And I just showed them the basic compass, and we went over, these are north, east, south, west. They annotated when you combine, north and east, you get northeast, northwest, southwest. We went over overall, what is Arizona a part of in the greater US, the Southwest. So we even went over, never eat soggy waffles, but one student did say never eat soggy watermelon, which is a first. I've never heard that. But we really wanted to go over these directions so that we can be able to identify the mountain ranges and their directions in Tucson. And so we went over the different mountain ranges that we have, and I kind of turned into a game, right? Because on remote wise, there's only so much I can do for this. I would say, okay, which direction is the Rincon Mountains in? And they'd all have to chat me. And we started labeling the maps together and really identifying where they're at. And then we discussed, how do mountain ranges affect Tucson as a desert, which, they said, well, Tucson is in a lower elevation compared to our mountain ranges that are a higher elevation, which allows us to get snow, but also the hotter temperatures. And then we also identified, where is Mount Lemon, right? That's a place that the kids love to go to, and they were able to see kind of the direction that Mount Lemon is in. And so what I learned as an educator, students, they need background knowledge on vocabulary words like cardinal directions, arid precipitation, land features. Obviously, hands-on learning would have made the lessons much more engaging. Um, Students connected their understandings of climate change from previous science units as well as our water units. And students don't really know the directions of Tucson or just in general. They don't really understand where north is, east is, and so on. Um, and so my future plans for these lessons, right? If I could have a do-over and have kids that I can interact with, I would, well, for one, I'm going to continue the lessons on ocean currents and air circulation and getting into that topic of how the Sonoran Desert is a very diverse desert with all of those factors and how, how that contributes to Tucson overall. I would love to make physical cards of desert images to sorting, make a desert pile or non-desert pile to see what they come up with. I would love students to come up with their own desert misconceptions or truths first as groups, and then as a whole class, really define what is true and what's not. I would also really like to have physical maps, where they can point out those land features and they can annotate where what directions the mountain range is in and really circle the currents that affect us and the air circulation patterns that really move in towards Tucson. I would also really love to go outside with compasses just so that they can get the sense of direction, and be able to like go around outside at Borton. Okay, which direction is Bell in? Which direction is our classroom in? And see, just to have that physical tool. And then go into Bell and really identify the factors of the Sonoran Desert. Point out the plants, the vegetation, what kind of species can survive in this, um what do they notice about like the ground, the texture, the dirt, what does that have to do with the desert itself, and what can they picture, what can they predict will happen to these vegetations and dirt and other aspects when there is more precipitation or not, and be able to compare and contrast those differences. But that is what I have so far. I also don't have, a lot of physical products because everything is remote. And so by the end, my goal is to create, have them make like their own PowerPoint of really describing what a desert is and using images to be able to define it, be able to show that they can annotate maps, identify where Tucson is um, on a map and the land features around it. But that is going to take a couple more sessions and so on.